On my 68th birthday, my husband Frank looked at the package that had just been delivered to our front door and said, "Ruth, don't open it, can't you see?" I looked closer at the cardboard box sitting on our welcome mat. Small holes were punched along the sides. The box was shifting on its own. Something was moving inside, scratching and squeaking. My hands started shaking as I stepped back. "Call the police," Frank said, his voice deadly calm. "Right now." 10 minutes later, Officer Martinez arrived and took one look at that box before calling for backup. When animal control showed up, I knew this was serious. But what they found inside wasn't just disturbing. It was the moment I realized my own children had become strangers. The note that came with whatever was in that box made my hands shake. When Frank read it over my shoulder, his face went white. That's when I knew this wasn't some cruel prank. This was war. Frank had been warning me for months that my children's behavior was getting dangerous. I kept thinking I could handle it. After all, I'd spent decades managing difficult people. But as I watched the officers document everything, I realized Frank had been right. This wasn't family drama anymore. Someone had planned this carefully. They knew Frank's Tuesday grocery routine. They knew exactly when to strike for maximum impact on my birthday. What happened next would change everything. Because this was just the beginning. Before we continue, please leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, and subscribe to Never Too Old channel. We're creating a community of incredible women who know that our best chapters can happen at any age. Now, back to the story. 4 years ago, I thought I'd found happiness again when I married Frank. My first husband died 8 years earlier, and I'd resigned myself to spending my remaining years alone. Then Frank moved in next door after his divorce, and we discovered we both loved gardening and old movies. When I told my children I was getting remarried at 64, you'd have thought I announced I was joining a cult. "Mom, this is embarrassing," my daughter Carla said. "People our age don't get married. They live together if they're lonely." My son Kevin was more direct. "What's he really after, Mom? Your house? Your retirement money?" Only my daughter-in-law Lisa pretended to be supportive. But I caught her eye rolls whenever Frank was around. "It's just so weird," she whispered to Carla at the small ceremony. "I mean, at their age?" Frank ignored all of it. He'd raised 2 kids on his own after his wife left, and he understood family drama. "They'll come around," he said. "Give them time." But they didn't come around. Instead, they started treating Frank like an intruder and me like I'd betrayed them somehow. The first year was manageable. Kevin would make snide comments about Frank taking over Dad's house. Carla would call during dinner just to check if Frank was there, then suddenly remember she had to go. Lisa posted old photos of me and my first husband on social media with captions like "Remember when families actually mattered." By the second year, the resentment had turned into something uglier. Kevin started showing up unannounced. Always when Frank wasn't home, he'd pace around the living room, complaining about his job, his bills, his ex-girlfriend. Then he'd ask for money. "Just until I get back on my feet, Mom. You know I'm good for it." I helped him the first few times because that's what mothers do. But the amounts kept getting bigger, and Kevin never seemed to get back on his feet. When I mentioned it to Frank, he pulled out a notebook. "Ruth, in 6 months, you've given Kevin almost $3,000. That's not helping nine. That's enabling." Frank was right, but saying no to Kevin was like poking a bear. The last time I refused, he slammed his fist on my kitchen table so hard my coffee mug jumped. "You can afford to give your husband a comfortable retirement, but you can't help your own son?" he shouted. "Dad would be ashamed of what you've become." Carla was subtler but just as persistent. She'd bring my grandchildren Amy and Tyler over for visits, then casually mention how tight money was as a single mother, how Amy needed new school clothes, how Tyler's baseball equipment was falling apart. "I hate asking," she'd say, bouncing Tyler on her lap, "but I just don't know where else to turn." When I'd write her a check, she'd kiss my cheek and promise this was the last time. But there was always something else. Car repairs, medical bills, daycare fees. The breaking point came 3 months ago. I was having lunch with my neighbor Janet when she mentioned seeing Kevin at the casino downtown. He was at the poker tables, she said. Looked like he'd been there a while. That night, I confronted Kevin about the gambling. His face turned red, and for a moment I thought he might actually hit me. You're spying on me now? What's next? Hiring a private detective. He leaned in close, his voice low and threatening. You better be careful, Mom. Frank's not going to be around forever to protect you. Frank happened to walk in during that last part. The look on his face made Kevin take several steps back. I think you should leave, Frank said quietly. Now! After Kevin slammed the door, Frank turned to me with an expression I'd never seen before. Ruth. That wasn't a frustrated son asking for help. That was a threat. From now on, I'm keeping track of every interaction with your children. I thought Frank was overreacting. But after what arrived on my birthday, I realized he'd been the only one seeing clearly all along. When the animal control officer finally opened that birthday package, 6 terrified rats scrambled out into the carrier. They'd been trapped in that dark box for hours, scratching at the cardboard, leaving claw marks on the inside walls. But it was the note underneath them that made my stomach turn. Happy birthday to the rat who chose strangers over family. Time to clean house. Your loving children. Officer Martinez photographed everything while Frank stood beside me, his jaw clenched tight. The officer looked at us both seriously. Mrs. Hayes, this isn't a prank. This is criminal intimidation with intent to cause emotional distress. Whoever did this committed a felony. Frank pulled out his phone. Officer, I need to show you something. I've been recording my wife's children for the past 3 months. I stared at him. Recording them? Ruth, after Kevin threatened you, I started keeping my phone ready whenever they visited or called. Frank's voice was steady, but his hands were shaking slightly. Frank pulled out his phone. Officer, I need to show you something. Last night, Kevin called Ruth directly. I was in the kitchen when her phone rang, and I could tell something was wrong from her face. So I started recording. He pressed play, and Kevin's drunken voice came through Ruth's phone speaker. Mom, you need to get rid of Frank. This whole marriage thing has gone on long enough. Ruth's voice. Shaky. Kevin, you're drunk. We'll talk tomorrow. No, we're talking now. Lisa and Carla agree with me. We've been discussing it, and Frank's got to go. You're embarrassing the whole family with this ridiculous old age romance. Kevin, please. I'm serious, Mom. You can't handle living alone. We all know that. Remember how you freaked out over that mouse in the basement? You need family taking care of you, not some stranger who's after your money. Ruth's voice got firmer. Frank is my husband, and this conversation is over. Fine. But don't say we didn't warn you when something happens that makes you realize you need your real family. Tomorrow's your birthday, Mom. Maybe it's time for a reality check about who actually cares about you. The line went dead. Frank stopped the recording. Officer Martinez was writing furiously in his notebook. Mr. Hayes, how long have you been documenting their behavior? Frank reached into a kitchen drawer and pulled out a thick folder. 3 months of incidents. 23 audio recordings of threatening phone calls, 47 hostile text messages, photographs of Kevin showing up intoxicated and refusing to leave, screenshots of Lisa's social media posts calling Ruth's marriage disgusting and embarrassing to the family. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Frank had been protecting me this whole time, building a case I didn't even know we needed. Officer Martinez flipped through the folder. This is thorough documentation. Mrs. Hayes, your children have escalated from financial manipulation to criminal harassment. The rat delivery was meant to be the final intimidation tactic. But why? I whispered. What did I do that was so terrible? Frank sat down beside me and took my hand. Ruth, I found something else last week. Kevin's been telling people around town that you're suffering from dementia. He's been setting up a story that you're incompetent and that your marriage to me isn't valid. The room started spinning. What? He's been laying groundwork to challenge your mental capacity. If he could scare you enough to leave me, or if something happened to me, he planned to have you declared incompetent and gain control of your finances. Officer Martinez looked up from the folder. Mr. Hayes, This evidence suggests a conspiracy to commit elder abuse and financial exploitation. With the rat delivery, we're also looking at criminal intimidation, animal cruelty, and harassment charges. I felt like I was hearing about strangers, not the children I'd raised and supported. But then I remembered Kevin's threat from 3 months ago. Frank's not going to be around forever to protect you. He hadn't been making a prediction. He'd been making a plan. Officer Martinez, I said, finding my voice again. What happens now? He looked at me with the kind of respect I hadn't seen from my own children in years. Now, Mrs. Hayes, your children are going to learn that terrorizing an elderly woman isn't just morally wrong. It's a serious crime. And thanks to your husband's documentation, we have everything we need to make sure they face the consequences. Frank squeezed my hand. Ruth, they thought you were helpless. They thought I was just some old man who couldn't protect you. They have no idea what they've just started. For the first time in months, I felt something other than sadness about my children. I felt angry. And after 45 years of dealing with bullies in the school system, I knew exactly what to do with that anger. After Officer Martinez left with his report and evidence folder, Frank and I sat in our kitchen staring at each other. The animal control officer had taken the rats to be properly cared for, but the smell of fear and desperation still lingered in the air. Frank, I said quietly, how did you know to document everything? He smiled for the first time that day. Ruth, you forget what I did for 43 years. I was a mechanical engineer at Boeing. When something starts failing, you don't wait for the catastrophic breakdown. You document the stress patterns, measure the increasing pressure points, and prepare for the inevitable structural collapse. You analyzed my children like a mechanical system? I analyzed their behavior like any other escalating threat. And Ruth, they made a critical miscalculation. They assumed you'd react like a helpless victim, instead of like someone who spent decades managing crisis situations. That's when it hit me. Kevin, Lisa, and Carla had forgotten who I was before I became their mother. For decades, I was the principal at Roosevelt Elementary. I didn't just handle difficult children, I handled their difficult parents. Parents who screamed at teachers, threatened lawsuits, demanded special treatment, and tried every manipulation tactic in the book. I'd faced down fathers twice, Kevin's size, who thought they could intimidate me into changing their child's grades. I'd calmly called security on mothers who threw tantrums worse than Carla's when they didn't get their way. I documented harassment from parents who made Lisa's passive-aggressive social media posts look like amateur hour. Frank? They have no idea what they just did. What do you mean? I stood up and walked to my home office. In the filing cabinet, I still had my old principal's handbook, my crisis management protocols, and my incident report templates. 45 years of dealing with entitled, aggressive people who thought the rules didn't apply to them. When Kevin threatened me 3 months ago, you started documenting like an engineer, but I should have been responding like a principal. I pulled out a folder I hadn't touched in 4 years. My incident escalation protocol. Step 1. Document the behavior. Step 2. Establish clear boundaries. Step 3. Involve appropriate authorities. Step 4. Implement consequences with no room for appeal. Frank looked at the folder. What is that? My incident escalation protocol. Step 1. Document the behavior. Step 2. Establish clear boundaries. Step 3. Involve appropriate authorities. Step 4. Implement consequences with no room for appeal. And if they don't respond to consequences? Step 5. Permanent removal from the environment. I looked at Frank. In school, that meant expulsion. In real life, it means restraining orders and criminal charges. Frank was quiet for a moment. Ruth, your children just committed several felonies against someone who spent decades perfecting the art of making consequences stick. The phone rang. I looked at the caller ID. Carla. Answer it, Frank said, reaching for his recording app. Let's see how confident she is now. I put the phone on speaker. Hello, Carla. Mom, I heard police cars were at your house. Are you okay? Her voice was syrupy with fake concern. I'm fine, sweetheart. Someone sent me a very interesting birthday present. Oh, what was it? The audacity was breathtaking. She was fishing to see how much I knew. 6 rats. And a lovely note from my loving children. Dead silence. Mom, I have no idea what you're talking about. Rats? That's terrible. Who would do such a thing? Years of listening to children lie had taught me every tell, every inflection, every verbal dodge in the book. Carla, I'm going to give you one opportunity to tell me the truth. Did you participate in planning what arrived at my house today? Mom, you're scaring me. You sound confused. Maybe you should call Dr. Peterson and schedule a checkup. There it was. The mental incompetency angle, right on schedule. I see. Frank, did you get all of that? Every word, Ruth. Should I play back Kevin's call from last night where he mentioned your reality checks for today? I heard Carla's sharp intake of breath. Carla. Honey. This is what's going to happen. You, Kevin, and Lisa have 24 hours to decide how you want to handle this situation. You can either contact the police yourselves to confess and apologize, or you can wait for them to come to you with arrest warrants. Mom, you can't. I spent my career teaching entitled children that actions have consequences. The lesson plan hasn't changed just because I'm retired. I hung up. Frank was staring at me with something that looked like awe. Ruth Hayes, remind me never to get on your bad side. They thought they were dealing with a confused old woman who would be too embarrassed to fight back. They forgot they were dealing with someone who made a career out of holding people accountable for their behavior. The phone started ringing again. Kevin this time. Let it ring, I said. Step 2 is establishing clear boundaries. They no longer get immediate access to me whenever they want to manipulate or threaten. What's step 3? I looked at Officer Martinez's business card. Involving the appropriate authorities, which, thanks to your documentation and their confession call, is already in progress. And step 4? I smiled, feeling more like myself than I had in months. Implementation of consequences. Kevin, Lisa, and Carla are about to learn that terrorizing a school principal's mother was the worst mistake they ever made. Frank laughed. I think I'm starting to understand why you were so good at your job. Frank, they thought this rat delivery would be their final move to get rid of you and control me. Instead, it's about to be the evidence that removes them from my life permanently. The phone rang again. Lisa, this time. I turned it off completely. Boundary established, I said. Now we wait for them to make their next mistake. The next morning, Frank and I were having coffee when Officer Martinez called. Mrs. Hayes, I have an update. We traced the purchase of those rats to a pet store downtown. Kevin Hayes bought them yesterday afternoon using his credit card. The store clerk remembers him specifically because he insisted on the biggest, most aggressive ones and asked for a cardboard shipping box instead of a proper carrier. I looked at Frank. He used his own credit card? Gets better, Officer Martinez continued. The store has security footage of the entire transaction. Your son was clearly intoxicated and made several statements to the clerk about teaching someone a lesson. We have him on video saying, "My mom thinks she can replace her family, so now she gets to live with rats instead." Frank shook his head. After all his planning, he left a perfect evidence trail. There's more. We contacted the delivery service. Kevin paid extra for specific timing. He wanted the package delivered exactly at 10 a.m., when your husband would be at the grocery store. The delivery driver remembers Kevin emphasizing that the woman receiving the package would be old and easily scared. I felt my professional instincts kicking in. Officer Martinez, Kevin's behavior shows premeditation and intent to cause maximum psychological harm to an elderly person. In my experience handling crisis situations, this level of calculated cruelty indicates he'll escalate further if not stopped immediately. I agree completely. We're documenting everything for restraining order applications. Kevin for the delivery and animal cruelty, Lisa and Carla as accessories based on Mr. Hayes' recording. We'll also be filing harassment charges and looking into elder abuse violations. After the officer hung up, my phone started buzzing with text messages. Kevin had apparently spent the night rallying his sisters for a coordinated attack. The first message was from Kevin. "Mom, we need to talk. Frank is poisoning your mind against your own family. Then Lisa chimed in. Ruth, Kevin told me about your confused phone call yesterday. We're worried about your mental state. Finally, Carla sent her guilt trip. Mom, the kids are asking why Grandma won't answer their calls. You're hurting Amy and Tyler by choosing Frank over family. Frank read the messages over my shoulder. They're trying every manipulation tactic at once. It's the panic response, I explained. When entitled people realize their usual tactics aren't working, they escalate desperately. I've seen this pattern hundreds of times with aggressive parents. By noon, Kevin was pounding on our front door. Mom, open up. We need to settle this like adults. Frank looked out the window. He's brought Lisa and Carla with him. They're all here. I could see them through the peephole, Kevin pacing angrily, Lisa clutching her purse with white knuckles, Carla checking her phone repeatedly. They looked like a pack of wolves circling wounded prey. Frank, start recording. This is about to be their biggest mistake yet. Kevin banged louder. Mom, we know you're in there. This is ridiculous. We're your children. I opened the door but kept the chain lock engaged. Hello, Kevin, Lisa, Carla. Mom, thank God. Carla rushed forward. We've been so worried. Kevin told us you accused us of sending you some kind of package. That's right. 6 rats with a note from my loving children. Lisa stepped forward, her voice dripping with fake concern. Ruth, honey. That's a very serious accusation. Are you sure you're remembering things correctly? Maybe the stress of maintaining this house at your age is affecting your thinking. There it was. The mental incompetency angle again, right on schedule. Kevin pushed closer to the door. Mom, Frank's been filling your head with paranoid nonsense. You never used to be suspicious of your own family. Take the chain off, Mom, Carla added. Let us come in so we can talk about this properly. You know we love you. I looked at all 3 of them. My children, standing on my porch, trying to gaslight me into believing I was imagining their cruelty. I have a better idea, I said calmly. Why don't you explain to me how Kevin's credit card was used to purchase 6 rats yesterday afternoon at Peterson's pet store? Kevin's face went white. Lisa grabbed his arm. That's impossible, Kevin stammered. I haven't been to any pet store. Really? Because the store has security footage of you specifically requesting the biggest, most aggressive rats and telling the clerk that your mother thinks she can replace her family, so now she gets to live with rats instead. Carla tried to laugh. Mom, that's crazy. Why would Kevin say something like that? The same reason you asked him if he got the biggest ones, and wondered if I'd think about it every time I looked at the welcome mat where Frank puts his shoes. Dead silence. They were staring at me like I'd just pulled off a magic trick. How do you... Lisa started, then stopped. How do I know about your planning conversation? Frank recorded Kevin's call 2 nights ago when he threatened me and mentioned my birthday reality check. Every word of your conspiracy is documented. Kevin's shock was quickly turning to rage. You recorded me? That's illegal. Frank appeared beside me at the door. Actually, Kevin, in this state, only one party needs to consent to recording a phone conversation. Since it was Ruth's phone, the recording is perfectly legal and admissible in court. Court? Carla's voice cracked. Mom, you wouldn't take your own children to court. You committed several felonies against me. The decision about court is no longer mine to make. Kevin slammed his fist against the doorframe. This is insane. We're your family. Blood is thicker than whatever you think you have with Frank. Kevin, in my professional experience, people who use family relationships to justify criminal behavior always escalate their tactics when they don't get their way. What's your next move? Breaking in? Physical intimidation? More animal cruelty? Lisa was crying now. Ruth, we made a mistake, okay? We just wanted you to realize that this marriage is isolating you from people who actually care about you. By terrorizing me with rats? It was supposed to be a wake-up call. Carla exploded. You used to care about our problems. You used to help when we needed money. Now everything is about Frank. Frank. And there it was. The truth finally emerging. This wasn't about concern for my well-being. This was about losing access to my financial support. So the rats were punishment for not giving you enough money? Kevin stepped closer to the door, his voice turning menacing. Mom, you better think very carefully about how you want this to end. We can make your life very difficult if you keep choosing Frank over your real family. Are you threatening me again, Kevin? I'm warning you. Frank won't be around forever. When he's gone, you'll need us. And we might not be so willing to help someone who had us arrested. Frank held up his phone. And that threat is now documented too. Kevin, you just made a terroristic threat against an elderly woman in front of witnesses. Lisa grabbed Kevin's arm. We should go now. But Kevin was too angry to think clearly. You know what, Mom? Maybe you deserve to be alone. Maybe Dad was lucky he died before he had to see what you became. The words hit me like a physical blow. Frank stepped protectively in front of me. Get off our property, Frank said quietly. All of you, right now. Carla made one last desperate attempt. Mom, please. Think about Amy and Tyler. They love their grandmother. Don't let Frank destroy your relationship with your grandchildren. Carla, using children as emotional weapons is another form of abuse. If you truly cared about Amy and Tyler, you wouldn't be teaching them that criminal behavior is acceptable when you don't get your way. They finally left, but I could hear Kevin shouting as they walked to their cars. This isn't over. Frank's turned you against your own blood. But blood always wins in the end. Frank closed the door and pulled me into his arms. Ruth, are you okay? I was shaking. But not from fear. I was shaking from anger. Frank, they just made every mistake I hoped they would. Threats in front of witnesses, admission of guilt, escalating intimidation tactics, and documented promises of future retaliation. What does that mean? It means they've given us everything we need to ensure they can never do this to me again. Tomorrow, we file for restraining orders. And thanks to their performance today, no judge in the county will deny them. The phone rang. Kevin again. I answered on speaker. Hello, Kevin. Mom. I'm sorry about what I said about Dad. I didn't mean it. We were all just upset. Can we start over? Classic manipulation. Apologize for the most hurtful part while ignoring the criminal behavior. Kevin, you and your sisters just spent an hour on my doorstep denying you sent those rats, then admitting you did it, then threatening me with future consequences. Which version should I believe? We can work this out as a family, Mom. You don't need to involve the police. Actually, Kevin, the police are already involved. Officer Martinez will be in touch soon about the restraining order hearing and possible charges. I hung up. Frank looked at me with admiration. Ruth, they came here thinking they could intimidate you into backing down. Instead, they handed you enough evidence for solid restraining orders. They thought they were dealing with a frightened old woman. They forgot they were dealing with someone who made a career out of recognizing manipulation and documenting unacceptable behavior. My phone buzzed with a text from Lisa. Ruth, we'll tell everyone in town that Frank has isolated you from your family and convinced you to have your own children arrested. Your reputation will be ruined. I showed Frank the message. And now they're threatening to destroy my reputation if I don't drop the charges. What are you going to do? I smiled for the first time all day. I'm going to let them try. Because tomorrow they're going to learn that threatening a respected educator in a small town was the biggest miscalculation of their lives. 2 weeks later, I sat in Judge Williams' courtroom wearing my best navy suit, the same one I'd worn to hundreds of difficult parent conferences. Judge Williams had been on the school board when I was principal, and I'd worked with her on several education initiatives over the years. Kevin, Lisa, and Carla sat across the aisle with their hastily hired attorney, looking like they'd rather be anywhere else on earth. Your Honor, their lawyer began. This is clearly a family dispute that's gotten out of hand. My clients are concerned about Mrs. Hayes' mental state since her recent marriage, and they were simply trying to get her attention. Judge Williams looked at him over her reading glasses. Counselor, are you seriously arguing that delivering live rats to a 68-year-old woman constitutes appropriate family intervention? Well, no, Your Honor, but... And the recorded threats against Mrs. Hayes and her husband? The financial manipulation? The coordinated harassment campaign? Judge Williams flipped through Frank's evidence folder. This documentation is remarkably thorough. Frank had outdone himself. Every threatening text message, every hostile phone call, every incident was cataloged with dates, times, and detailed descriptions. Photos of Kevin showing up intoxicated, screenshots of Lisa's social media attacks, audio recordings of their threats and manipulation attempts. Mrs. Hayes, Judge Williams said, would you like to read your victim impact statement? I stood up, feeling every bit the professional I'd always been. Thank you, Your Honor. My name is Ruth Hayes. Until recently, I was the principal at Roosevelt Elementary for over 4 decades. I mention my career because it's relevant to what happened to me. I looked directly at my children. Kevin was staring at the floor. Lisa was dabbing her eyes with tissues. Carla was checking her phone, even in court. Throughout my career, I dealt with parents who believed intimidation, manipulation, and threats were acceptable ways to get what they wanted. I learned to recognize the patterns. First comes the guilt manipulation, then financial pressure, then escalating threats, and finally actual harmful actions. Judge Williams nodded. Please continue. My children followed this pattern exactly. When I remarried, they began with emotional manipulation, making me feel guilty for finding happiness. When that didn't work, they escalated to financial pressure, demanding money and becoming hostile when I set boundaries. Then came the threats, veiled at first, but increasingly direct. I held up the evidence folder. The rat delivery wasn't a prank or a misguided attempt to get my attention. It was calculated psychological warfare designed to terrorize me into compliance. They wanted me to end my marriage and return to financially supporting their irresponsible lifestyles. Kevin's head shot up. Mom, that's not. Judge Williams cut him off. Mr. Hayes, you'll have your turn to speak. I continued. Your Honor, what disturbs me most isn't the rats or even the threats. It's that my children believed I was weak enough to be controlled by fear. They forgot that I spent decades protecting children from adults who used intimidation to get their way. The courtroom was completely silent. I'm not asking for revenge, Your Honor. I'm asking for protection. My husband Frank and I deserve to live our remaining years without fear of harassment, financial manipulation, or psychological abuse from people who happen to share my DNA. I sat down. Frank squeezed my hand. Judge Williams looked at Kevin. Mr. Hayes, do you have anything to say? Kevin stood up slowly. For a moment, I thought he might actually apologize. Instead, he said, Your Honor, my mother used to care about her family. Now she only cares about Frank. We were just trying to make her see that her real family should come first. I closed my eyes. Even here, even now, he couldn't admit what he'd done was wrong. Lisa stood up next. Judge Williams, Ruth has changed completely since she married Frank. She used to help us when we had problems. Now she acts like we're strangers. And by help, you mean give you money? Judge Williams asked. Well, sometimes we needed financial assistance. Yes. And when she stopped providing that assistance, you decided to send her live rats? Lisa sat down without answering. Carla didn't even stand up. This whole thing is ridiculous. She's our mother. She's supposed to help us. Judge Williams set down her pen and looked at all 3 of them. In 30 years on this bench, I've seen many family disputes, but I've never seen adult children terrorize their elderly parent because she stopped funding their lifestyles. She turned to me. Mrs. Hayes, you have my respect. Your documentation is exemplary. Your testimony was clear and factual, and your request is reasonable. Then she looked at my children. Kevin, Lisa, and Carla Hayes. You are hereby prohibited from contacting Ruth Hayes or Frank Hayes by any means. Phone, email, text message, social media, or in person. You are prohibited from coming within 500 feet of their residence, workplace, or any location where they may reasonably be found. Kevin jumped up. You can't do this. She's our mother. Mr. Hayes, your behavior toward your mother constitutes elder abuse, harassment, and criminal intimidation. You're fortunate I'm only granting restraining orders instead of recommending criminal charges. Judge Williams continued. These orders are effective immediately and will remain in place for 2 years with the possibility of renewal. Any violations will result in immediate arrest and contempt of court charges. She looked at me one more time. Mrs. Hayes, you deserve to enjoy your retirement and your marriage without fear. If they violate these orders in any way, call the police immediately. After court, Frank and I walked to the parking lot together. I felt lighter than I had in years. Ruth, how do you feel? Free, I said. For the first time in 4 years, I feel completely free. As we got into Frank's car, I saw Kevin, Lisa, and Carla standing by their vehicles, looking lost and angry. Kevin was gesturing wildly, while Lisa cried and Carla scrolled through her phone. Do you think they'll learn from this? Frank asked. Honestly, probably not. But that's not my problem anymore. They made their choices, and now they have to live with the consequences. Frank started the car. Where would you like to go to celebrate? Home. I want to sit in our garden and plan what we're going to plant this spring. 6 months later, Frank and I were indeed working in our garden when Janet from next door called over the fence. Ruth, I just wanted you to know. Kevin was at the grocery store yesterday. And when someone asked him about you, he said you were mentally unstable and that Frank had brainwashed you against your family. I looked up from my tomato plants. Janet, does Kevin look like someone whose opinion about mental stability should be taken seriously? Janet laughed. You know what? You're right. He looked terrible. Like he hadn't shaved in weeks. And everyone knows what really happened anyway. That was the thing about small towns. The truth always came out eventually. People knew I'd been a respected educator for decades. They knew Frank was a kind, stable man who'd supported me through a difficult time. And they could see for themselves what my children were really like when they occasionally spotted Kevin stumbling out of the casino, or Lisa posting bitter rants on social media. Ruth, Frank said that evening as we sat on our porch watching the sunset. Do you ever regret taking them to court? I thought about it for a moment. No, I regret that it was necessary. I regret that my children chose cruelty over kindness. But I don't regret protecting us. Even though you'll probably never see Amy and Tyler again? That was the hardest part. I missed my grandchildren terribly, but Carla had made it clear that access to them was contingent on my compliance with her demands. Frank, I love Amy and Tyler, but I can't teach them that it's acceptable to terrorize elderly family members to get what you want. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable destructive behavior. Frank nodded. Your children thought they were dealing with a helpless old woman. They forgot they were dealing with someone who'd spent her career teaching bullies that actions have consequences. A year later, I got a letter in the mail. The return address said Amy Hayes in careful 11-year-old handwriting. Dear Grandma Ruth, it read. Mom says I can't talk to you anymore, but I wanted you to know that I remember the stories you used to read to me. Tyler and I miss you. I hope you're happy with Mr. Frank. Love, Amy. I cried when I read it. But they were tears of hope, not sadness. Amy would grow up knowing that her grandmother had chosen dignity over manipulation, boundaries over enabling. Maybe someday she'd understand that was the most important lesson I could teach her. Frank found me on the porch, holding Amy's letter. Good news? He asked. The best news. My granddaughter is growing up to be a strong, thoughtful young woman. And she knows her grandmother loves her enough to do the right thing, even when it's difficult. As I write this story, Frank and I have been married for 5 years. We travel. We garden. We volunteer at the local literacy center. We have friends who value our company and respect our choices. We have a peaceful, loving home, where no one threatens or manipulates anyone. My children chose to see Frank as a threat to their financial access to me. They chose to respond with cruelty instead of acceptance. They chose manipulation over honest communication, and intimidation over respect. I chose to protect myself and my husband from their toxic behavior. I chose dignity over dysfunction. Some people might say I should have tolerated their behavior because they're family. But family isn't about shared DNA. It's about love, respect, and treating each other with basic human decency. And that's a lesson that never gets old, no matter how old you are. So, that's my story. I'd love to hear what you think. Do you think I should have tried to work things out with my children? Or I was right to protect myself first? Let me know in the comments, and subscribe for more stories like mine.